Hi everyone, my name is Alex and I'm a product manager here at Uber, and this is the latest webinar hosted by Product School. Welcome. Today I wanted to talk about product management in the modern world. I've called this presentation Product Management in the 21st Century, maybe somewhat influenced by a recent book by Yuval Harari called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. So I don't know, I call this 6 lessons for global teams. I'm assuming a lot of people work in global companies, a lot of people work in internet, and hopefully for those folks, this would be relevant, especially if you work in a large organization with team members around the world. And for others, I hope you find this useful and insightful, no matter the size of the company or the location of the company. All right, so what do we want to talk about today? I want to tell you a little bit about what we do, the team that I work on currently, the different teams we support internally. I want to chat about how we work, our approach to problem solving and product management. And then I want to move into the actual different skills and mix of skills that we use in different organizations. I'll mention what kind of skills we use at Uber as product managers within my team. And I'll also share some of the other organizations that I've been a part of and how the different skills that they required in order to make things happen there. And then I'll talk about the 6 lessons that I wanted to share. They're really like tips or experiences, but hopefully you find those useful. All right, so let's start with what we do. I'm currently part of a team, an organization called FinTech. Essentially, they build and maintain different systems and applications to deal with financial transactions. In our case, we work in something called tax compliance. So we build and maintain applications and systems to collect and validate tax information of mainly of partners who earn money on the platform. So that we can issue the relevant financial and compliance type documents, including receipts, invoices, and so forth. So that's where I'm currently staffed. The apps that we support, the Uber has a whole bunch of different apps that it goes to market with, and you're probably familiar with the main one, getting a ride or getting something to eat through Uber Eats, or if you're a driver partner, you're familiar with the driver app, which looks like this. But we support different mobile apps and different websites, and let me walk you through this. So on the web part of this, if you are a rider, you're able to log into the rider portal and look at stuff like where you went, how long your trip took, when it started, when it ended, and what kind of payment method you used. You can update your payment method in your wallet here. You can see how much you paid and so forth. So that's the desktop web portal of the riders. We also maintain certain sections of the driver portal, or the driver partner portal, as we call it. So if you're a driver partner, you can see your earnings here. They're split up by monthly summaries, or what we call tax summaries. Essentially, they're like earnings summaries showing your earnings and certain tax deductible expenses. You can see those either by month, for the months you have some earnings, or by year. You can also update your personal or company tax information if you are registered and operating under a legal entity, say S Corp or C Corporation or an LLC. You can update your mailing address if you have elected to receive the 1099 by mail, or you could also elect to simply download it and save some paper. You can also update your banking information from here. But anyway, essentially, this is the website where we maintain driver partner information and provide the ability to update it. Now, if you're a driver partner, you can update this on a mobile device as well. So, this is the web part of it. And you'll notice that this is a sort of like an older portal. So recently we made the decision to turn this into a mobile app and ship it into the App Store and the Google Play Store. So we support this functionality now in both stores, both on the Android devices and on Apple iPhone devices. The cool thing about this is we can do it within one code base. This is a technology that was internally developed in-house by Uber. It's called ScreenFlow, which is sort of like the Uber equivalent to Facebook's React Native or Google's Flutter. So the beauty of it is you can maintain near native or like native experience using native components in both stores using the same code base. And you can also use that code base eventually to build a responsive website. So like three birds, if you will, with one stone. So that's part of what we've shipped recently. Essentially, we've extended the driver app on the native mobile app, and we've been rolling it out to different countries. Uber is in over 60 different markets, and since these forms differ country to country, they really require some more detailed testing and making sure everything looks good. So what we do is we have this phased rollout, and we go country by country, making sure everything looks good before we move on to the next one. So we have something similar on the documents side. You'll see the entry point that we recently added to the driver app called Tax Info. What happened was we would get a lot of customer support calls from driver partners asking, where's my 1099? And in the States, the 1099 is basically a tax form showing driver partner earnings in case they made over a certain income threshold. In most states, that's $20,000, and it has to be $20,000 and 200 transactions. That's the basically the IRS rule. And since we didn't clearly at first message whether or not you'll be getting a 1099 form this year, a lot of people would just call customer support and go like, hey, where's my tax form? So we just decided to message that and tell driver partners if they're gonna be getting a form, whether or not they will get one, and we'll say, hey, you're getting a 1099 or you're not, and if you are, we'll provide you with access to it so you can download it and send it off to your CPA to help you file your taxes, or do it yourself via TurboTax or any of these apps that help you file taxes. So this is just another example of extending functionality from what we have on the web into the native mobile app. All right, I hope that gave you some idea of what we do and the kind of apps we support in tax compliance. So let's talk about how we actually work in terms of who are our clients, how we coordinate, how we plan, how we do resourcing. I want to give you an idea about that. So I like to think of our environment in a way that we're all clients of each other, and I think of the different groups of clients as users, internal customers or stakeholders, and external customers. Our users are, of course, our partners, driver partners, couriers or delivery partners, merchants, the different restaurants, riders, the Uber service that you're familiar with, the Jump electric bikes, the Lime scooters, and organizations, or a service called Uber for Business or U4B. Then we have all the different internal teams, our tax teams, legal, operations, finance, risk, fraud, safety, very important teams, compliance. And then on the product side, or product development, product engineering and design. These are just some of the internal teams that we work with on a regular basis to consult and make sure everything looks good and is up to date and up to the latest regulatory requirements. And then we have the external customers, vendors that we work with, integrators that help us with our e-invoicing projects, and different regulators, different local tax authorities, law enforcement agencies at the city, state, or country level. So that's sort of like the mix of clients who inform our roadmap. So let's put this in perspective. In terms of scope and scale, Uber is currently in over 60 countries. It has operations in that many markets. It's localized in over 70 different languages. And like I mentioned earlier, it has about a dozen apps that it goes to market with, and it maintains more than 6 line of businesses. The most recent ones are delivery. You probably heard of the Uber Direct service and grocery delivery. And you're probably familiar with the rides, eats, bikes, and scooter services. So that's at a super high level, Uber's scope and scale. So how do we work? Given the client groups that I just mentioned, it's super important to figure out who our customer is when a requirement or a business need or a ticket or support issue comes to us. It's super important to figure out who's asking for this. And then secondly, we need to know why. Like, why do you need to work on this? Why is this a problem? And ultimately, what does success look like? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? Now, these questions are typically owned by the product team, and this is where I get more involved in the who, the what, and the why. And the how is more like on the engineering side. They have the creative freedom to figure out different solutions and ultimately approach to solving a problem. And then the when is sort of shared within both the in the product development team, engineering, or what we have engineering managers or EMs and PMs. And of course, we coordinate this with the stakeholders and the customers who have maybe planned a certain launch or unveiling a new service, or they want to test something new. That's where the when comes in. All right, so what's our product lifecycle? It's actually fairly standard. We go through the same steps that everybody else does: define, design, build, test, and deploy. In the definition phase, we try to talk to as many customers as possible, or we parse through different support tickets and see if there's a pattern, an issue that keeps repeating, or issues that could be impacting a ton of users. So that's what I call the discovery phase, which eventually gets fleshed out into requirements documents, narratives, or what we call here PRD, so product requirement documents. We go through designs. Obviously, we work with designers to produce sketches, wireframes, mockups. We review these with the internal teams and especially the folks that asked for this to make sure that we got it right. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So no matter how good your requirements are, until you show something on a screen, it's hard to be sure that you're on the right track. Then we go into building it. This is where I also want to do check-ins with the client. If this is a more involved feature, we'll show them a prototype, even if it's sort of like bare bones. We want to show them how far we got and make sure we're on the right track. We do demos and check-ins, and we continue with development. Then comes the fun part. We start doing these pilot rollouts. Depending on which market and which city or metro area a feature is meant for, we have the ability to target a certain geography and a certain amount of traffic. So we can do these phased rollouts to different parts of the world, different parts of the country, different parts of the metro area, and thus be sure that everything looks good and all the systems are up and running. And eventually, once we're 100% live, we can start sending out comms and getting people to engage more with the product. So fairly straightforward, fairly standard product life cycle here in this group. Let's talk about how the team is distributed globally. Now, as we know, when you have operations in different markets, that calls for some local support. And in our case, since we deal with financials and tax and local tax authorities, it helps to have local counsel. So we have people in the States, in Canada, in EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Also in Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, and of course, LATAM. That's sort of like the international distribution of the team. It's good to have this in perspective because that comes with some logistical considerations in terms of time zones, in terms of response times, and so forth. Now, what's the mix of resources in the different countries? It's good to keep in mind that all of these offices came about during different times when the market was different and the customer needs were different in the different places. And so it's entirely possible that you have different resources in the different markets. And for example, I'm just making these up. In Egypt, we could have a regional general manager, a tax council operations associate, and some engineering support. And in the States, we could have also engineering, but we could have a product team, again, tax, and legal representation. So typically, engineering is ultimately responsible that everything works, but either the PM or the operations person could be accountable. We always try to make sure that the tax team is consulted, and of course, we make sure that legal and general management are informed on all of these things, even if we don't need their input. It's always good to know what's shipping. So that's the roles and responsibilities, staffing in the different markets. It can just be very different. It could be just one person if this is a brand new place. It could be 2 or 3. It's always good to be aware of the local resourcing and the fact that you may need to pull in people from elsewhere or step into some of the things to do them yourself. All right, let's talk about the mix of skills. I've had this question come to me from different places at different times in my career. People who aren't part of product management, of the product management role world, they typically want to know how to get in and if they have the right set of skills. And I think it's worth talking about the fact that different organizations, depending on how many people are in the organization, how large the teams are, may call for different mixes of the different skills. So there's an endless number of skills that you can apply in this job, and they keep evolving from requirements gathering, scoping, forecasting, planning, facilitation, client services, all the way through production and documentation. All of these are important, but do you need all of them in all the different companies you're gonna work at? Like, are you gonna need only a certain set of them if you're working at a startup? Are you gonna need more of those or less? I think that's interesting to discuss because I think it will be a relief for a lot of people to know that in different organizations they may require they may need their help with different things. So let's talk about that. So this is a small list of different engagements and companies that I've worked at. The first one is a creative brand agency that was a part of in San Francisco. They're called Solution Set. Really awesome crowd of people. They got acquired by a larger marketing company called Epsilon. I'll talk about Glassdoor, the job search and company reviews and salaries site. A little startup called Tennis Round. This is a messaging and player matching website. And then, of course, Uber. So I came up with some of the top skills and I weighted them. I did an educated guess as to what skills I used in the different places. Obviously, this is not super scientific, but you can eyeball this, and I just want to make the case here. So we have stuff like, again, requirements gathering, project scoping, product planning, staffing, data analysis, design, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to focus on those that I think appear more in different places. So in the agency world, it's very heavy on client services. You get involved in basically figuring out stuff like what do you guys want to work on? Why is this important? All the way through, well, really, how large is your budget? How much can you afford for this? And then try to figure out what staffing model would be sufficient in order to build, design, and ship this. And so I would say that client services is very heavy in the agency design, web development, outsourcing slash consulting world. Then in Glassdoor, also another fun crew out of Sausalito in Marin County. There was a lot of product planning there. Not so much client services per se, because it's a fairly contained team. When I was there were like 600 people, so still a mid-sized company. But there was a lot of engineering planning within the job search infrastructure team. Let's take a look at a startup here. There's something that I call, or I borrowed rather, making something out of nothing. I heard this from actually the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Glassdoor, Rich Barton, who's also the founder of Expedia and later Zillow. So he likes to say, that he likes to make something out of nothing, essentially building useful things where there was nothing before. So in a startup environment, when you look for product market fit, and when you really create sometimes even new categories and services that we didn't even know we needed, I would weigh this fairly high, making something out of nothing, as a skill, because this plays into being creative and inspiring people to pursue something that is very often hard. Like in this case, this is sort of like another lead gen play where you match players at the same skill level in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. And, you have to get to a certain level of liquidity so that people can find each other to play at a certain time, which is very similar to how Uber operates, because in order for you to get a ride, you have to have supply, you have to have drivers who are available in order for you to hail a ride. And so at Uber, I find that requirements gathering and talking to clients, the internal stakeholders that I showed you in the prior slide, is pretty intense. Why? Because we're in over 60 countries, and because financial regulations and tax rules can differ country to country, and once they're established, they can change. So there you have it. You have a ton of complexity for something that is seemingly simple. It's just one screen, but it has different rules in 50 different countries around the world. So anyway, be aware of that. Be aware that different size companies may call for different set of skills, and don't be troubled if you lack some of them. Like when people write job descriptions, they often write sort of like a wish list of everything like in a perfect world a person would bring with them, but that's rarely the case, especially since we work in an environment where we work on stuff we've never worked on before at a very high pace. All right, so let me talk about the things that I find inspirational, and I think they may be helpful to you in your company, or if you decide to pursue a product role here at Uber. Number one, take the initiative. People talk about ownership often these days. It's a funny topic because people want us to own stuff, but it rarely comes like packaged and ready for you to pick it up and own it and go like, okay, this is mine now. But really, the best way to make something yours is to take the initiative. Take a stab at it, see how it works, try it, play with it, and sooner or later you get to understand it, and therefore you own it. As much as I like to play and try new things, as many other product people, I actually got this. This was framed by Seth Godin in one of his latest books called Poke the Box. So basically, the idea is that ownership comes from understanding, not from control and equity. And he advocates that we need to get good at starting stuff. And so I think it's good to always try and sort of get in the driver's seat, so to speak, and see how the product works firsthand, because it's so insightful. And given that we ship stuff so quickly and so often these days, really the best way to find out how things work right now and what might be missing is to do it yourself. So use the product when you can, right? Because I don't know if you guys watched the recent launch of the Crew Dragon by SpaceX, probably the most exciting thing I've watched in the last several days. So these are the two astronauts from SpaceX, Doug and Bob, about 3 hours prior to launch, looking at this beauty. I don't know how these guys test their products in production, so to speak. I think this was their first shot at it. They've probably done a bunch of simulation, but I don't think they get to test stuff in production the way we do with I don't know, internet products. But when you can, like I said, get in the driver's seat and see how it works. So recently, I was in San Francisco and I took advantage of the Uber partnership with Hertz rental cars because my car wasn't in San Francisco, and I wanted to see how things work on the fintech side, specifically with regards to collecting tax information, going through the onboarding process and all of that. But I found out a whole bunch of other stuff that then I shared with the broader product team. Like, for example, you see this little car mount here. This is something that I actually didn't find in the car. And I just played with my phone a little bit. I couldn't get it to attach anywhere, so I finally said, I can't do this. I'm just going to go to Target and pick up one of these things. And the process of doing that, I probably spent like an hour dealing with all this. And then when I shared my notes with the broader team, they decided to go ahead and just equip all vehicles with this. So super exciting to see that the team rallies around stuff like that and improves customer experience. And we wire towards reducing friction, and like we go through all kinds of user journeys and design iterations in the internet world. But you can do this in the product world too, and Uber is one of those companies that transcends both the digital and the physical world. So it's nice to pay attention to both. And again, I found out a whole bunch of other stuff that I didn't even look for. Like, for example, when we work on these financial back office systems, sometimes it's hard to know exactly what the user experience looks like. And in this case, I wasn't quite sure how the experience works when you toggle between the different services of delivery, food delivery through the Uber Eats service and delivery and providing trips. And it turned out that it's actually done within the same app, within the driver app, which is something that I just found out firsthand, along with a whole bunch of other stuff in terms of payment statements and getting tax summaries and figuring out how to access them, which eventually informs our sort of perspective into what the entry points might be, what would be a good experience. It's always helpful to have that hands-on experience, because then you literally put yourself in the shoes of the customer and you have that perspective. That's like invaluable. All right, number 2, use a playbook. This is something that I also borrowed from someone. I was at a design conference in San Francisco once. It's amazing how many things you can learn from conferences that are not straight up product management conferences, but like design, one of my favorite topics in general. There was a speaker from Atlassian, a lady that talked about product management there. Atlassian is the company that makes Jira, the ticket management system that a lot of companies use. And basically she said, stop using these project plans. Use, because stuff changes so quickly. It's hard, like nobody has a crystal ball. It's hard to predict everything. And if you sleep a week or two, it's not the end of the world. The more important thing is to know what to do given the different scenario. And that just struck me as like something that I've thought about, but I never really quite formulated it. And I'm like not the biggest follower of American football, but in this case, I really appreciated the analogy because it turned out that given different scenarios and different team formations, you can apply different tactics. And I think that kind of attitude is super important in our fast-paced world. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning here is that when it comes to delivering, we, or at least in my teams, we try to deliver a mix of sort of like quick wins and bigger goals, because quick wins, smaller things can be quite valuable nonetheless. And bigger things that involve a lot of infrastructure work, a lot of architecture changes, and they're sort of like tied into more complexity, they're also more difficult to predict and more things can go wrong. So, they're always on the radar, but we try to mix them with stuff that we can ship more quickly and, still make an incremental gain. Number 3, make something up. This one I actually borrowed from in my first job as management consultant at Bearing Point, the former KPMG Consulting. Our managing director had a T-shirt that said something to the extent of "I make stuff up" or "I make things up," and it was just hanging there in his office. And I was always like wondering, why is this important, and why is this T-shirt in his office like as some sort of trophy? And eventually I learned that when it comes to working with ambiguity, which is often, the environment in the consulting world, it's helpful to have the ability and the skill to make stuff up, to start somewhere, to start a conversation, and to sort of like provide that proxy, that baseline as to where we could be going, and then all kinds of other conversations can start from there. So even if it's the wrong thing, really, just make something up and get it going. And in the words of one famous Amazon investor, oftentimes it's down to not who's going to make the right choices and who's going to be wrong the least, but who's going to go around the block the quickest. Sort of remember that. All right, so number 4. This was inspired by a recent book that I read by Yuval Noah Harari, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I'm actually in the process of reading the other 2 books as well. I guess I'm reading them backwards because I think this is the latest, the 3rd one out of the 3. And so I call this "Keep Reinventing Yourself" because gosh, there's so much stuff that we work on these days that we've never had to deal with before, at least in my world, and at least in the companies and the roles that I happen to be working in. And I think he's right that our success will often depend on our ability to deal with change and to learn new things. And he calls this mental stamina, like the ability to not get overwhelmed and just pick up new skills, get comfortable with new stuff, and get comfortable with ambiguity and just being comfortable with the fact that you won't know everything, and be coachable and learn new stuff. So yeah, number 4, keep reinventing yourself. Number 5, I just touched on this, love the unknown. So I think we're always going to be working with a number of unknowns. It's super rare that we'll go into something and go like, yeah, I've done this 1,000 times before. I know everything, right? That's just super rare. I think the challenge is to get to, a certain comfort level with the fact that out of 10 things you want to know, you probably only know 3 and be able to work with what you have. So, we won't always know everything that we want to, but when we get started, but that's okay. We should get comfortable with that. And number 6, this is again super philosophical, but I learned this in one of my coaching seminars that I attended, and I keep using this. It's not exactly out of a product management book, but I do find it helpful because we're knowledge workers in many areas. In this case, in the internet world, but or something that they would call information worker at Microsoft when I was working there. And so, number 6 is build a mindset of abundance. The conflict here is between having a mindset of scarcity and a mindset of abundance. And what I mean by this is that I think, in my mind, I think there's always going to be more work. There's always going to be more stuff to work on. And the fact that, the fear that, once you share something, a bunch of other people will know it and therefore we're replaceable, I think that just it won't go very far as attitude. And I think quite the opposite tends to happen. It's almost like you pay it forward and what goes around comes around. It's I try to sort of share as much as I know with as many people as possible. And funny enough, that way you almost like make everybody else part of this progress, and you sort of like make everybody empowered to make decisions on their own, and therefore you delegate everything you know. But the fundamentals here are around really building a state of mind that's centered around abundance as opposed to scarcity. All right, so with that, I hope I've set up the stage for a fun discussion. So if you guys have any questions or any comments, I'd love to chat. If you guys want to get in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.